just going to say what everyone's been afraid to say about the Pauper format, and that it is actually the single best time to be getting into it right now. With how unfair the format is, with Burn at the top, Affinity, and its own Splinter Twin situation in the Brood-Scale combo, there are only a few matchups to really learn when it comes to the winningest decks. Play your brew, play your combo, play your new spice that you want to introduce at the common level, and just build towards those matchups, and then learn from there in the league data, and just build your repertoire of knowledge against other matchups as they come up. But even though it's a good time to get into the format, is it a fun time to be playing as an enfranchised player? That's a whole different question. And in this video that we're going to be going over today, there's a lot of criticisms put out that attempt to be data driven against the Pauper format panel and their claims on win rates and what decks are at the top. But I think this video does ultimately lack a little bit of the glue in between to drive home the point against the Pauper format panel and some of their decisions about the format itself. Ultimately, win rate data doesn't mean that much if we don't have a high sample size, and sometimes if we're just focusing on the challenges or high level tournaments, that may not tell the whole story as well, but it's not like we have access to the league data either. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a nuanced situation. So before we hop into the video, I want to ask your opinion. What do you think about the Pauper format right now? Do you think it's a good spot to just enter and learn the format, or do you think it's a really bad spot to just get enfranchised and learn because it's really boring and you're forced into these like 10 sideboard slots against Burn, or else you're just not going anywhere in the format? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and let's hop right into it. Pauper format panel is clueless. Good morning magic, constructive criticism. Oh Lord, we got the hot one. This is a hot one. All right, leave a like on the video already. All right, let's see what there is to cook on the Pauper
Poison
format.
Storm is the best Pauper deck for 2025. Burrow Synthesizer is on top of the food chain, and Mono Blue Fairies is the deck to beat. That is what we have learned from the last Pauper format panel update video released on the Good Morning Magic YouTube channel. Wait, what? Poison Storm and Burrow Synthesizer are the most winning decks? How can these decks be the most successful despite them showing up nowhere? At least Mono Fairies recently has picked up in play, so we can check if the 55% win rate in leagues can be replicated in challenges. Apparently,
I don't know if this is too much to look into though. This is just like one of those things where it's like sampling rates. Like, yeah, it's the most winning deck list, but maybe only like 5 people have like played it or something. Like I don't think Poison Storm is a very popular deck. To be fair, more recently it has, thanks little in part to me, but mostly in part to other creators like Kalikai's and all that stuff that, you know, very good at the deck put it out there and making more videos on it. So I imagine it's part of that popularity, but I'm not sure if it's like, I don't know if it's this deep to look into in terms of win rates versus meta share, because that doesn't really tell a story unless you have a high representation as well. Here we have a low representation and just like a high win rate, which is like definitely just a sampling thing. So Mono Blue Fairies are kind of quoting 6.14% of the meta game, about a 49% win rate on challenge data. So it seems to be clear that I believe, and I don't think the Pauper format panel has admitted this, but I believe that they do have access to league data, being kind of Wizards adjacent, having Gavin Verhey as the leader. I do believe they have that. So that's something in addition that I think they use as part of the data to kind of analyze win rates versus, you know, mirror win rates always going to be 50-50, but, you know, the non-mirror win rates against the top of the metagame, against affinity decks, control decks, combo decks, all that stuff. So that's something that we don't have access to.
Between what is said and what the wider Pauper community can observe. So we will have to take a closer look. You know what they say, with great power comes great responsibility. We have the privilege to have a conversation about the format and therefore the responsibility to keep the Pauper panel honest. This video will not discuss any bans. You will have to stay tuned for my next videos to see an in-depth data-driven approach of Pauper card banning and unbannings. Instead, we will look at what information the Pauper format panel has given us and how it is presented.
Okay, so let's do this first and foremost. Over the past 30 days, the top of the Pauper metagame is Burn, Grixis Affinity, and Jund Brood-Scale by a mile. I think you could include Mono Blue Fairies in there. I think it just shows the speed of the format here is here. The reason mono blue fairies, in my opinion, is able to tango with this metagame is that it's able to play all the Pyroblast, Hydroblast for the burn matchup, but then also play a suite of good disruption against the Jund Broodskill deck while also presenting a clock. It's a similar situation to Grixis Affinity as well. You know, kind of a good clock, a lot of tempo, a lot of card draw, just a lot of resources. This one's kind of good disruption, good removal. And that's why mono blue fairies is able to hang. The rest of the metagame, you'll notice, has a steep drop off. You could kind of lump in Golgari Broodscale into Jund, but just having access to red is pretty big for them. So I don't know. I would roughly put this as probably like higher than Grixis Affinity if you want to look at Broodscale overall. And then after that, there's like a really big sharp drop off in the metagame share of other decks. Like Blue Terror, ends up being one of the best threats in the format, just at like 1 mana, and then also having access to blue in other cheap 1 mana interaction spells is really powerful as well. But I think like it just misses out on the fact that sometimes the deck just whiffs. It isn't able to find its threats. It's not able to find enough threats to overcome. It doesn't put enough blockers out in front. It's just not drawing enough, whereas mono blue fairies can sometimes just poop out like some early unblocked ninjas, and then like that's where you're at. Dredge has some fun pieces because it's able to gain life so well. Madness Burn just has like this cool like tempo aspect to it, but I think in general, like it's really these three. Mono blue fairies contends because it's able to play again the Hydro Blasts and Blue Elemental Blasts, and that's really the big reason for it. But the metagame is really fast right now, and with that, I actually like I probably mentioned this already in my intro. I kind of record them after the fact, but the metagame is really good for combo decks right now. It's actually a really good time to learn the format and play combo and understand what that is, which is also why I think Poison Storm's doing really well, because although Poison Storm isn't a super fast combo deck, it main boards like 4 Weather the Storm. And so decks like One Land Spy, decks like Cycle Storm, heck, even decks like Walls Combo, which like traditionally is a slow type of combo deck that does kind of fall to easy removal. Like decks like these can just get like free wins because sometimes it is just about being faster than burn, and you do draw that sometimes it is just being faster than Splinter Twin in that case. And so this is where the Pauper metagame is, so let's use that to go into the rest of the metagame and see what data driven approach we have from Potestas Nesses. I've mispronounced that.
Talk about the best decks in the format: Boros Synthesizer and Poison Storm. Their play rates are abysmally low. Consulting tournament scraping sites, the MTG top 8s, MTG Goldfishes and MTG decks of this world, those decks are played 0.3 and 0.5.
Yo, shout out to my Pauper old heads. Anyone remember Sen's Enlistment? Come on, I used to be a Boros Bully player. I love that deck. A little too slow now, but you know, still an affinity lover on the side. But yo, the Sen's Enlistment win condition, the one of that you had, ooh baby.
5% respectively. In the challenges, their play rates and win rates look very set. For Poison Storm, it was actively set. The sample size is low, which can mean anything. With other sites observing very low play rates, this leads to the belief that the sample size is so low that no meaningful statement can be made about the deck.
Okay, good.
If you look at data from challenges, we also can see that apparently Celestia Gates is at a 59% win rate, but we only have 39 matches on record, so this is meaningless for the greater picture. And if no other statement is given, we should consider Poison Storm only for memes, not for deck choice. Apparently,
Poison Storm is goated, by the way. It's a really fun deck. Just saying, y'all should pick it up.
This is different for Boros Synthesizer, since the low sample size warning was not given. Despite that, Boros Synthesizer doesn't show up anywhere on deck collecting sites, so how can there be a good enough sample size to give an accurate estimate for how good the deck is? Okay. My working theory is that the Pauper format panel got leak data from the last 12 months, meaning those winning Boros lists that they mention are actually lists with all that glitters in them going back to early 2024. Since the All That Glitters ban, we can observe a big reduction in play rate from Boros Synthesizer decks, so those can easily be outpaced by the huge number of Boros decks from before the All That Glitters ban. All in all, win rates of Poison Storm, Boros Synthesizer, or Mono Blue Fairies cannot be observed or replicated in publicly available resources.
Okay, wait, but we can replicate the Mono Blue. We literally just went into the metagame right now. This video came out recently. We literally just went into the Mono Blue Fairies win rate. It's like a top 5 deck right now. Again, because of its cheap interaction, consistent consistent, like biting, like just poking at damage and threat angle, as well as its ability to play Hydroblast, Blue Elemental Blast in the sideboard. Like that's it. Like the fact that it has all these options for red is, and to be fair, it's forced to play that. Mono blue has to play at least 6 copies of a blast effect against red in the sideboard. If you're playing any less than that, I don't know, you're mainboarding some, or you're like, I don't know, you're overboarding. You have to respect burn. There's no good life gain in blue. You have to go colorless for that, and that's not the angle that mono blue wants to take at the moment. I don't know what we're saying. We can't replicate this.
This means those reports are more a distraction than an honest representation and evaluation of the format. Moving on, the video has shown a variety of cards representing different decks and giving the conclusion that the current meta is quite diverse. When showing cards for our diverse Pauper metagame, Thermocast, representing a land destruction archetype, shows up more than any other card. Yet in the last month, this archetype is completely absent, as Gruul players adapted their deck to fit the new meta.
Yeah.
The format has changed throughout the year, partly.
This is one of the ones that made me sad, and this is partly due to the introduction of the kind of quote-unquote Splinter Twin effect, like the Brood Scale combo, where getting rid of people's lands just aren't as effective tempo-wise. Like, things tend to be really low cost. The combo itself is really low cost, the Brood Scale combo, and they tend to have like indestructible artifact lands anyway, which again, if we needed to change something, we could probably just ban the indestructible artifact lands. We don't have the Cleansing Wildfire ramp packages anymore, and it would just dumb things down. It'd make land destruction a lot better. It'd make control a lot better than in response, or tempo-based control a lot better. It would definitely shake things up a lot. It'd make affinity a lot worse. Like, it would do a lot. I don't think we banned the untapped artifact lands, but to be fair, they're not talking about bans. I'm just kind of bringing up what a lot of people have been talking about anyway.
Because the Pauper format panel did take action against all that glitters, highlighting new developments like Gruul Ramp ditching Annoyed Altisor in favor of Colossal Dreadmask, and the newest innovation of Benahai Khrushchev can be more interesting than trying to get people to try Serpentine Curve or Deathblade Elite decks that were already niche 2 years ago. Showing old decks, praising decks that don't get played allegedly using old data, we want a Pauper format panel that is in touch with the current state of the format and not clinging to the past. And finally, let us talk about the most popular deck in the format and how we came to the conclusion that Mono Red Kodotha could possibly be fine for the format. First of all, let's talk about the only metric we...
I don't know. Okay, I'm trying to understand the thesis of this video, and I understand their frustration. I have my frustrations with the format as well, but like, I don't know if we're presenting a solid argument here. We're making assumptions about assumptions, right? Like, we are assuming that they have access to league data. I tend to agree, but then we're also making an assumption on how they're using that league data to kind of base their opinions on. I think we might be cherry picking a little bit. And hey, as a slop content creator myself, sometimes, like, yo, I've been known to cherry pick some words, but I don't know about this one. There are problems with the Pauper format. I do think the lack of recent inaction from the Pauper format panel is worth criticizing. I'm not sure if this video is approaching it the right way.
Received. Win rate. Mono Red is the most played deck. We can easily assume a meta share over 20%. In challenges, the deck is played by 14% of players, and since the league environment suits Mono Red way better than challenges, the play rate should only go up. This means the difference between overall win rate and non-mirror win rate is getting noticeable. Here, non-mirror win rate refers to the win rate after excluding games where both players play the same deck, in this instance, Mono Red versus Mono Red. In mirror games, the result is always a 50% win rate for the archetype. This will shift the overall win rate towards 50%. We care about non-mirror win rate more than overall win rate in this particular.
One thing I will add to this is that you see this in all formats. You see this in Legacy, you see this in Modern, you'll see this in Standard as well. We see it like through the implementation of Best of One. But the idea is that when you play aggressive strategies or really fast combo decks, Oops All Spells in Legacy, One Land Spy in Pauper, Burn in Pauper for this example, you will just on average be playing more games of Magic for your for the time investment that you have. People have a certain amount of time invested and they want to, not only play a bunch of games of Magic, like you could spend an hour or less in a league playing 5 games of One Land Spy because the deck is just very like, you win on the spot or you don't, you take the L, whatever. And you can get more out of your time just winning through leagues, 3-2ing leagues or 4-1ing leagues or whatever, 1-4ing leagues, but getting your fill of the game on like for your time investment. So that's why these decks generally, if they're at the top of the metagame, still tend to be really popular if they're playable. And so that is a good way for not only people to get their games, but also grind out like trophies and stuff. So you will see when these type of decks are popularized, at the top of the metagame, the trophy leaders and stuff, you will tend to see those trophy leaders be playing on average more aggressive decks. I'd be willing to bet right now the modern trophy leaders, like on average, not only are they going to be energy players, but they're also going to be breach players. I would say the Dimir Frogtide players are probably lower on that scale. I'd assume it's energy because it's really powerful, and then breach because it tends to be really fast, and the breach pilots like generally know what they're doing in terms of managing the rest of the metagame. Like, again, when it comes to Pauper, I think part of this is the fact that you just get really fast. You don't need to think. You don't need to like think through like, should I spell stutter sprite this? No, just lightning bolt, move on. I think in general, it's a much easier deck to pilot. There are some sequencing elements to it. Like, should you Cold Oath the Rebirth? When should you? What should you play first? How do you set up and maximize your damage based on, you know, the first 2 lands that you see? What is the deck that you're playing against? There are some sequencing decisions, but on average, those are learned like and picked up really fast. And it's just the reward curve is a lot like smaller. It's more approachable for something like Mono Red Burn.
To our case, because we are discussing how different decks perform in relation to one another.
Right.
Since we care about the relation, and we are judging the Pauper format on a macro archetype to macro archetype basis, mirror games hold no value. With an approximated 20% meta share, and therefore a mirror game percentage of also 20%, we can assume that the non-mirror win rate is at least 53%, and more if we assume a higher meta share. This increase in only 1 percentage point is not crazy, but we have to ask us the question, at what point is the win rate too high?
Wait, how did we assume this? I don't know. Like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to act like, you know, I took my stats in university. Maybe I'm missing something in the data, but I feel like we're still making like some assumptions here and some leaps in logic that could very well be true. But I think we need to explain and be a little bit more depth. We need to dumb things down for folks like maybe folks like me, but okay.
2% is still fine, but is 53% fine? What about 54%? Where do you draw the line?
For me, it's 55.
Down the win rate by including mirror games for a widely played deck can obfuscate how strong this deck actually plays. Considering that Mono Red Kudosa is the most played deck, it forces numerous sideboard slots dedicated to it. This comes up in the report as post-sideboard the deck performs worse than pre-sideboard.
Yep.
Still, knowing that you on average face at least 1 Mono Red player per league, the 52% win rate, or probably 53% non-mirror win rate, is extremely strong. The video didn't convey how strong the statistics are, but the strength is recognized as the stats are in line with other situations where the Pauper format panel did decide to take action. This means we are potentially looking at a ban for Kudosa in the near future.
Didn't we just say how we're not going to talk about bans in this video? Wasn't that at the beginning?
But is the deck even good? If you look at data from MTG or challenges, the deck doesn't even break the 50% win rate mark and is not spiking challenges. Combined with the fact that apparently the second most played deck is Glee, which Mono Red pairs favorably into, this means the win rate should be somewhat inflated due to a lacking diversity in leagues. The overall matchup spread against the whole field should still be quite decent. MTG or data does facilitate this notion, but Mono Red has quite a few bad matchups. So when the meta doesn't just consist of a good matchup, the red deck can't...
Y'all aren't seeing this, but the source of this information at the bottom below my camera, I'll hide my camera here, but challenges since Modern Horizons 3 until, you know, what is this? What did it say?
Up the performance.
Until, the 25th. Okay, the 25th of January. Okay. Yeah, I mean... Rakdos Madness, again, just another burn strategy. Gruul Stompy, being above, just having access to green is really powerful here. White Weenie, I'm actually kind of surprised that it's kind of this low, but I guess it's maybe its combo matchup that holds its back, but it has like good life gain options. I think it has decent life gain options. Mono Blue Terror and Grixis Affinity, I'm not surprised. Grixis Affinity tends to be like a pilot issue, but sometimes like it does kind of stutter. Like it does require like, okay, it has really powerful main board options and some good sideboard options, but like a lot of those options don't just like work by themselves. They require high synergy pieces. For example, there is the draw to effect that you sacrifice an artifact or a creature and you gain life equal to the sacrificed permanence converted mana cost. Ideally, you're playing on a Mirror Enforcer, and then you're sacrificing that, drawing 2 cards and gaining 7 life. But if you were to sacrifice something like a Blood Fountain, then you're only gaining 1 life. So those are the type of situations where you're not gaining as much. Like it's a really powerful card, drawing 2 cards, and then obviously if you have a Blood Fountain out, you can then return the Mirror Enforcer later down the line and keep the kind of chain going. But you do need those cards out in synergy, and that's what I find like Grixis Affinity kind of falls. It has really powerful options. It can stay. But it tends to have that type of pilot error. And when it comes to mono blue terror, again, like I mentioned, it really just stumbles on itself. It's like mono blue fairies, but like technically worse because it has like a fail rate where you don't find as many threats or sometimes any threats at all in the early game and your opponent's able to power out. Dimir Terror tends to have more control elements to it, especially sideboard options. But the black splash doesn't really, like, in my opinion, add anything net positive against the red matchup, but it does help against a brute scale affinity matchup, in my opinion. Just doesn't really help against the burn matchup. So that's where I think it falls. Ultimately, like, I don't know why we're talking about a Boros bully ban. Like, I'm kind of confused by a lot of elements in this video. And I'm just open to criticism. I imagine like the user, like I'll probably be tagging the creator and everything. Maybe they're watching this and they can provide some counterpoints, but like, I'm just kind of confused as to some of the points in this video.
That we do not need to ban anything from Mono Red, despite the leaked data promoting a ban. Even more surprising is the absence of a discussion of Mono Blue Terror. It's the third most played deck in challenges and performs the best of all commonly played decks at a 54% win rate against other decks. How are we having a discussion about what cards to ban if the supposedly good decks are non-existent? We are ignoring currently well-performing decks, basing our view on the format on outdated and or skewed data and not even reporting general metrics like time frame of the data or games reported. Step up your game, Pauper format panel.
I think there's a lot of assumptions in this video. Okay, all right. One thing I will say is one of the big downfalls of the Pauper format in general is that we have yet to make it like an RC high level format. We have recognized it as an official format. I think it's actually being relatively well managed by the Pauper format panel, but not having enough eyes on it. Like, people believe Pauper to just be a meme. It has great gameplay overall, very deep, knowledgeable gameplay. A lot of people's general criticisms, I've heard this meme where like sometimes you spend hours on a single Pauper game because there's so much back and forth happening. Like, it feels like you've played a lot of Magic in an average Pauper game. But I think just making it a tournament set like format for RCs or Magic Cons or whatever would be a big step forward in getting eyes on the format and more people playing it and more people caring, so we can make more active decisions continuously. Like, should we be banning Deadly Dispute? Should we be banning the tapped artifact lands? Like, I definitely think something needs to be banned out of mono red. Are we going to be banning Basking Brood Scale? Probably come March. And the reason I say March is that's where we're going to get our next ban and restricted arts update for our constructed formats, namely Modern. After the RC season is over, we're going to get some unbans. That's going to be a popular time for constructed Magic to be at the forefront. We know that next week we're going to be getting an update for the Commander format panel about the format itself, probably around the idea of their bracket system. But come down the line, we probably will be getting a banning for Brood Scale, probably something with Affinity, maybe if they want to go that far, but probably something out of Burn to slow it down a little bit, and then free up space in sideboards for the mono blue decks to go somewhere. I'm not sure if we need to primarily be using challenge data to be informing all this. I will say a lot of it does matter, but you do need to take in tournament data and league data as well, because the vast majority of players are playing in leagues. We see that even with my own challenge analysis in Modern, like there are challenges where less than 100 people are playing in a given challenge. Sometimes even as low as like 40 people are playing in certain challenges. So obviously that's like holidays and timing and all that stuff. So there's a lot of factors that play into that, but it doesn't necessarily paint the whole picture of the average play experience, which is what we need to look at when it comes to league data. So challenge data only tells the idea at the top. And I think Terror has that win rate like in that kind of sample size. I do have a lot of problems still with Terror as like a game plan. It's still really powerful, but I do believe that it doesn't really hold up that high win rate when it comes to over the course of league data when you put it up against repeated burn, control, affinity matchups over and over and over again. And I imagine a large majority of the leagues as well are also just like anti-burn matchups. Like it's the Bogles decks, like just playing lifelink in the main. It's like a bunch of Weather the Storm strategies. It's a bunch of combo decks just trying to go fast. Like it's a bunch of these strategies that can maybe sometimes circumvent the whole counterspell aspect. Like you have 8 anti-burn counterspells in your sideboard. All of a sudden you play up against Bogles, they resolve a slippery Bogle, put some amount of like enchantments out on the battlefield, and then all of a sudden your terror means absolutely nothing. You're having to use 1 to 2 terrors just to like counter block into something like that. So when it comes to like data like this, I think we're making a lot of assumptions in this video. I don't think we actually made a singular argument as to why the Pauper format panel is like doing anything. We are using the limited data that we have to try and create an assumption. But to be fair, then you could argue that why not give us the data? The whole idea is that we would solve the meta game and it would just become too numerical. Like we aren't given this data for a very important reason, because a lot of Magic players, like this creator, is very they're very data driven, and so they're naturally going to tend towards the decks that tend to be winning a lot. But in a lot of ways, it tends to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Metagames are very like volatile things. Like people will just go to the decks that early on are winning really high, but it doesn't mean that is the best deck. Like we see it in Modern with something like Orzhov Blink coming to the top of the fray very recently, picking up steam a lot over the last month and a half or so, especially close to the end of December 2024. We see Orzhov Blink slowly making its way up, and we see the win rates going up. We see some soft additions from Aether Drift and Ketramos. So there's going to be a lot of excitement around these type of strategies. And so I think there are hidden decks out there. There are really powerful decks out there that a lot of people aren't willing to try because they're kind of bored of the format right now. And I think the injections such as, you know, being an RC format, being a high level tournament format, and not just having like grassroots events like supporting Pauper are a good step forward to getting more people playing the format, more people trying out different decks and really seeing what the top of the meta game is. But obviously, again, it's still going to end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. I just think having more eyes on the format to draw more conclusions, have more tournament data and not just challenge data is really important when it comes to things like this. And I'm not sure if this is, again, for like the millionth time, a really good argument for why the Pauper format panel isn't like I think like we're twisting Gavin Verhey's words, because I like distinctly remember in that video where like Infectious Inquiry, they're talking about Infect Storm being like a really popular, like high win rate. Like I'm pretty sure I remember his tone, and just someone in the comment section let me know. Like I'm pretty sure it was just like oh, here's like a fun fact. Like, did you know Poison Storm's actually at the top? That's kind of fun. Like we see like a lot of variety in the formats. I think we do, right? We see this consistently in other formats as well. Like on average in a Modern league, yeah, you're gonna play against Energy once, you're gonna play against Breach once, but then the other 3 decks tend, in my opinion, have that variety. They tend to have that variety, and that's my experience with recent leagues of Pauper. I play against Burn once. I usually play against Broodscale once. Affinity, maybe not. Usually some type of blue-based strategy, and the rest of it is just like, yeah, I might play against, you know, Poison Storm, I might play against Cycle Storm, I might play against Walls Combo, I might play against Bogles, I might play against, you know, Gruul Temple. Like there actually is a relative amount of variety in the league data. You tend to have a pretty diverse set of games when it comes to things like that. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is really what we want to be working towards. I think Pauper does require a change. I'm just not sure if this video really provided good evidence for it, but I like where it's going ultimately. So I don't know. I think that's where I'm going to end off my thoughts here. I'm just blabbing at this point.